world changes soon. Can get a doobie on a plane, but there's Uzis in our schools. Every dude who touched a boob or a booty getting me too. What you expect from the kids who went to Hooters after school? We're all triggered and defensive. We're all racist and we're sexist. We all grew up.
Welcome to the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. I am your host, Albert Apache, and as usual, brought to you by Open Source, Self-Defense, Fitness, and Grappling. Okay, guys, we're going to have one heck of a show for you today. We have a ton of topics to get through. We're going to start with Khabib possibly coming back to complete his 30-0 run, presumably against GSP. We're going to talk a little bit about his agent, Ali, and his new contract with One Fighting Championship. We're going to talk about Jorge Masvidal going ahead and breaking the barrier of coming out and endorsing a Republican candidate as a professional athlete. We're going to talk about The Social Dilemma, the movie, and what they got right and what I believe they've got wrong. And then we're going to finish up with the light heavyweight blunder of Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. So strap in, get ready, and enjoy the show. Hey guys, I know I don't always ask all the time, but I'm gonna ask now. Please remember, like, subscribe, share this video, or comment down below if you disagree. Let's have a little bit of back and forth. Okay guys, let's get on with the show. Okay guys, let's go ahead and get into our very first topic. So, for those of you who may not know, Dana White apparently has spoken to Khabib and thinks that Khabib will be coming back for one more fight and go for that 30-0 that he and his father had, seemed to have talked about as the benchmark they wanted to get to his entire career. This would mean that most likely the next fight would probably be a GSP for Khabib. Now, I'm a bit skeptical of this, simply because, Khabib is going to want the fight at 155. This would be probably the smallest GSP has ever been for a UFC fight. It's definitely going to mean that GSP is going to have a hard time making the weight. Not only will it be a hard time for him making the weight because clearly he bulked up to step up and take on a middleweight champion, right? But not only did he do that, but he also, right, is older. He also has gotten older. So GSP, 39 years of age, having to cut down to 155, I don't know if I buy that. The only way I think this is going to happen is if Khabib moves up. I think Khabib has to move up and at least do a catch weight of 165. I really think that GSP would probably stand firm and say, look, I'll do it at 170, but I'm not going to drop down to 155. Now, it could possibly be, if he could talk Khabib into it, for Khabib to come back and maybe do 2 fights, okay? Should he win, do 2 fights so that you could kick off the 165-pound division and you could see some restructuring of weight classes. There would be a lot of fighters interested in the 165-pound division. There'd be a lot of fighters really, really excited to take on Khabib at 165 rather than 155. I think you might even see a couple of 170 pounders go ahead and drop down to 165 to take on Khabib, right? So I think that's probably what's going to happen if they can make the fight happen, but I think they're really short time. I think they have a very small window to make this fight happen. You got about 6 months. If this fight doesn't happen in 6 months, essentially you're going to have a 32-year-old or a young 30-year-old in their 30s, early 30s, fighting a 40-year-old GSP. It's going to be really hard to sell to the public that this is a GOAT contender bout if you got one guy who is in his 40s and the other guy is in his early 30s. Right now, even though the age difference isn't going to change, it seems a little more plausible with the storyline if they're both quote unquote in their 30s. But they only have about 6 to 7 months to make this fight happen before the narrative becomes GSP's age, which all in all is just going to add to more of the argument against Khabib and Khabib's status as the GOAT. I personally do not think that Khabib is the GOAT. I don't even think that he is the number one pound for pound. I still think that that is John Jones. We did the show about that last week. But this is what may be coming up here in the near future. So Dana may get his way and may get Khabib back into the octagon. Now, here's the thing. I don't think he's going to do this fight for anybody else but GSP, because the reality is, while I respect Khabib as a fighter, and I do think he is one of the top, all-time best fighters the UFC has ever seen, as a pay-per-view draw, he is not that good. Okay, his pay-per-view draw is not outstanding. It's good, but it's not great. So I don't know that Dana is going to build an entire card around Khabib and him going for 30-0 if it's anybody but GSP. There's a slight possibility that he could make it happen with Tony Ferguson. That would be if Tony were able to fight between now and, let's say, June, and get a victory against a top level fighter, and then go ahead and say, hey, let's wrap this up for Khabib, and let him have beaten everybody that there was to beat in his era, and maybe that would sell. I don't think it'd sell as great as the GSP card, but it would sell a lot better than Khabib and anybody else, right? And I think that's the only other fight that you can make that would sell. Maybe Khabib Conor would sell decently. That would be, again, if Conor wins against Poirier coming up soon. If he defeats Poirier, maybe you can make that matchup. So, all right, guys, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. All right, so that rolls us right into our next topic. And that would be Khabib's manager, Ali Abdelaziz. So, apparently, back in July, it was announced that he had signed a partnership with One Championship, and he's going to start providing some of his top providers for the fight promotion of One Championship. This, we may be seeing, guys, the establishment or the rise of the very first super agent in MMA. So, for those of you who are unaware, Ali just represented two fighters in a title fight in the UFC, a title fight that a lot of people were just talking about. If you didn't know, that title fight was between Khabib and Justin Gaethje. Now, to my knowledge, that was the first time that we've seen two fighters fight for a title in the UFC that were both represented by the same manager. I don't know how he did it, but he pulled it off, and he pulled it off without a lot of incident. Generally speaking, you would see probably some, hurt feelings, some, there was a tiny mention of it, because somebody asked Justin Gaethje basically about it, in the whole sense of, hey, Dana, Khabib, and Ali, they're all talking about what's next for Khabib after he beats you. How do you feel about that? But it wasn't something that Justin brought up himself. And this leads me to believe that Ali is doing his job spectacularly when it comes to his actual fighters. Now, I've said in the past, I don't really like some of his tactics. I think that they're dangerous for, the fighters. I think they're dangerous for himself. I don't like the fact that as a manager and not a fighter that he confronts fighters, and that he gets in their face, and that he is an aggressor that way, and that he trash talks. Um, I feel like it's bad for MMA as a whole, but you cannot argue that his tactics are effective and good for his clients, the fighters. And really that's on the UFC and the MMA community and organizations. If they agree that it isn't good for MMA, they're the ones that are going to have to sanction him. Like he's doing absolutely the right thing. As far as a businessman is concerned, right? He's doing what's in the best interest of his fighters. So apparently, he will be providing fighters now for one championship, whom I believe is really. I know that Bellator has a bigger name here in the United States, but to me, one championship is actually a bigger contender or a bigger opponent to the UFC brand. And that is simply based on the fact that, they do their weigh ins a bit different, which tends to put your fighters in a more natural weight class. Um, Meaning, I think you get more competitive fights. You don't have fights where, you have one guy that, is walking into the cage at X pounds, and then another guy walks into the cage and he's at a whole different, he could be fighting in two weight classes above now, right? You don't have that kind of thing happening as much in ONE FC. They also allow a different set of rules when it comes to striking and kneeing to the head while an opponent is quote unquote down or on the ground. So it really changes the tactics of the fight. And in that sense, they're putting out a whole different product than the UFC. They do have a focus, and it talks a little bit about this in the article here, that they do have a focus on, appealing to more traditional martial arts values. They kind of discourage their fighters from a lot of trash talk. And Bushesha, one of Ali's new MMA fighters, right, has just signed with ONE Championship. So, if in fact, okay, Ali can get a title for one of his fighters in ONE Championship, this would mean that he is representing, multiple champions in multiple organizations. I have to believe that if that were to happen, that he would definitely establish himself as the super agent of MMA, and it would show that while you don't like all of his tactics, well, I don't like all of his tactics, he definitely understands what it takes for each organization in order to put his guys in a position to fight for the title. I understand he's not the coach. I understand he's not the fighter. I understand he's not the nutritionist. Okay. But I think a lot of times people discount the value of a great promoter, right? A great manager who puts his fighters in positions to win. When a manager is not blinded by purely money and understands that money has to be balanced with risk, has to be balanced with the timing of who the person fights, has to be balanced with development of the fighter. Okay? Yes, you might miss out on a couple of giant jackpot quick bucks, but it looks like Ali has done an amazing job of making money for his fighters and putting them in a position to succeed in the octagon or the cage, right? While continuing to make a fair amount of money, a really good amount of money. I don't know how other agents are going to compete. You know, the other thing is that people don't realize about Ali a lot of times is that he also trains. I believe he has one or two MMA fights. I believe he's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So, I mean, there's a huge relatability here. And when he can show, hey, look, I got this guy a title fight. I got this guy a title fight. I got this guy a title fight. I represent these champions. Man. And it's in every organization, in every significant organization. I have done this. I think it really puts him up there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more fighters start to come underneath the Ali banner. I believe it's Dominance. Yes, Dominance MMA. So keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes on the ball because you may be seeing the very first super agent in MMA. All right. Well, speaking of Ali, that brings us up into our next story, and that would be host Jorge Masvidal, and some of the waves that he is making in sports and in MMA with his support of President Trump. Now, guys, you know, here's the thing. It's not that athletes being in politics or putting their 2 cents in or celebrities in general uh, is a brand new thing. It's something that's been around for a while. But if we're going to be completely honest, generally speaking, the athletes generally break on the left towards the Democrat Party. 9 times out of 10, celebrities as well. And you hear a lot of celebrities and a lot of athletes that do come out for a Republican or a more conservative candidate, maybe a libertarian or whatever. You do hear them talk about the fact that there are a lot of people within, not a majority, but a lot, that don't share all the views of the Democrat or leftist or liberal wing of American politics, yet they are too intimidated by the repercussions of coming out, being ostracized. So you really have to give it to Jorge Masvidal for speaking up, coming out, and having to say something. Um, you know, it. I find it ironic that Jorge Masvidal is looked at in one of his nicknames, one of his monikers is the Street Jesus. Um, and, he talks about baptizing people, essentially, knocking guys out, whatever. And somehow uh, there are people who are not from where he's from that are in no way as legit as Jorge Masvidal. I mean, Jorge Masvidal is a legit dude. Like his story, as far as coming up, uh, fighting on the street, literally being a backyard brawler, into a making that into and parlaying that into a career in MMA, a very successful career in MMA. They think that they have the ability to question his authenticity. Authentic, yeah, that. Whether or not he is authentic, right? His authenticity as it pertains to his street credentials, his street cred. Now, to me, my opinion, I really think Jorge is speaking from the heart. I think that, this is really how he feels. If you go through and you read some of what he talks about the fact that, he doesn't know everything there is to know about Donald Trump. He doesn't think that Donald Trump is always right. He thinks Donald Trump makes mistakes. He doesn't agree 100% with everything that Donald Trump does. That being said, he understands that he doesn't have to agree with him 100% in order to support him. He just has to agree with him enough that it's worth supporting him over the other guy. So, I find this very, very, um, you know, inspiring and makes me hopeful. You've seen a lot of crossover with President Trump and some of his support, and people talking about being willing to work with him, and in fact working with him. For instance, Ice Cube, you've heard some uh, stuff about supporting him or voting for him anyway, from 50 Cent. Lil Wayne came out in support of him. Um, of course, you have a big, huge um, push from the black conservatives in the United States, like Candace Owens, for support of Donald Trump. And of course, now you have Jorge Masvidal, you have Kobe Covington. So you're getting more and more. I think just recently, over the weekend, Brett Favre came out in support of President Trump. So what I like about this is that it's becoming less and less of uh, a taboo to come out in favor of the right side of the aisle, right? It's always been cool or hip to be on the left side of the aisle because traditionally the left side has been known as, whether it's true or not, has been known as the anti-establishment kind of party, the stick it to the man uh, party, or stick it to the man side of the aisle, the rock and roll, if you will, the rebellious uh, side of the aisle. However, in the last probably 2 to 3 years, um, it seems to me that the left side of the aisle has revealed itself, has really taken off the mask and shown that they are the man, and that's what they want to be, is the man, and they want to tell you what to do all the time. Now, some people like that. Some people think that that's exactly what we need, right? For instance, with lockdowns, it's what some people think we need. Um, but now there's no longer the ability for you to claim that you are the stick it to the man um, wing of American politics. And so that vacuum is being filled now by Donald Trump and others on the right. And I think that's why there's less of a stigma now, right? And it's not so much taboo for these athletes and these uh, celebrities to start to come out in support of Donald Trump. So, Jorge Masvidal, man, up there in the limelight, kind of leading the way. I guess we'll see how that works out in the next couple of days here. All right, so let's move on to this next topic. For those of you who may or may not know, um, I guess for those of you who may not know, because that's who it mattered to, it looks like just, let's say, on the 29th, I came across this here, which is super great news, and that is that IBJJF World has announced they will have Worlds for their Masters division this year. at Silver Spur Arena in Orlando, Florida, from December 14th to the 20th. I think this is awesome news, guys. This is starting to get us back on to a more normal track, a more normal schedule for the jiu-jitsu community and the major events. So hopefully we'll see a good turnout for the Masters division. Now, generally speaking, from what I've seen in the past, registrations are not super heavy in the blue belt, purple belt divisions, but in the brown and black belts, it is a little bit more heavy for the Masters, and usually you get some really, really good matches. So I would keep an eye on Flow if you're interested in watching. It'd also be cool to see if they offer the no gi division and if they implement their new rule set with the heel hooks and reaping being allowed, because it would be interesting to see how it may change the outcome or what we think outcome should be of matches in no gi even at the Masters level, should that be the case. I'm super excited about this. I hope you are too. Been waiting a long time to see what was going to happen here. Was really hoping that Masters would make it onto the docket. Knew that they had canceled a lot of other events, and when I saw that Pans did get scheduled and did take place, I was very, very hopeful, very optimistic that Masters would also make it on to the docket. It has, and it should be a blast. I mean, think about it, guys. We have had people training in their basements, right? Going very kind of Rocky style. They're training in probably much smaller groups, not allowing open mats, probably not allowing a lot of other people into their facility. Just their little hometown team, just their own little inner circles, training with just their inner circles. So I think we're going to see, hopefully, or at least this is what I hope that we see, is some real matchups and distinctions with very distinct styles, right? From training with your little inner circle, your little inner group, and it should be really fun to check out what it looks like and see, hey, who kept training, who didn't, and what did it do for their style, for their tactics. I think it's going to be super fun to watch, guys. I personally love the Masters Black Belt division. Super entertaining, a lot of cool things. So looking forward to this. I hope you guys are too. You know, and man, been waiting for this. So super happy we're getting back onto a more normal schedule. All right, guys, red pill alert. We are going into a topic which may go against the grain or the norm for a lot of other shows and a lot of other people, and that is a review on Social Dilemma, right? The documentary that is on Netflix. You may have watched it, you may not have watched it. That being said, I do recommend that you go and you check out the documentary. Okay. Remember, I know you might be thinking, hey, this is outside the wheelhouse. We're usually talking MMA, we're usually talking sports, we're usually talking all these other things. And why are you talking about Netflix? Well, this is why we are the sports and entertainment show, the red pill sports and entertainment show. And this does fall within our wheelhouse. Number one, because it is a bit red pill, and number two, because it is entertainment. So let's talk a little bit about it. I've checked out this documentary, and you know, uh, this particular article at Cinema Blend talks a bit about how uh, social media, you know, um, it talks about the social dilemma movie documentary, and it talks about how it touches on some of the issues with social media, and how it's detrimental to our society. But there were some issues within the film itself. So first, let's start off with the basic premise of the film. The basic premise of the film is that what is going on with the algorithms, the programs, the artificial intelligence that uh, helps the different platforms, whether we're talking Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, grow what the the software programs, I guess, or AI programs that help it to grow by learning what you like and trying to give you what you like are growing so fast. Um, they're getting so smart. They're being able to compile the data so quickly that essentially they're hacking your brain, right? They're finding the things that are going to make you tweet, that are going to make you want to retweet, that are going to make you want to continue scrolling, and they put those things into your feed, right? And you don't even realize that this is being done. And this is why people will get onto their tablet, get onto their phone, and an hour will have gone by and they're like, oh man, it's been an hour, right? So um, this is essentially what the movie goes on to talk about. Talks about how essentially the chemical releases that go on in your brain, the dopamine, and all this stuff, and how essentially they're getting you addicted, like on a chemical level, to using their product, to using their platforms. Talks a little bit about how maybe there should be regulation, that definitely there shouldn't be this type of targeting towards young children, things of that nature, right? Um, and they go into that. I agree with the premise of probably, say about 80% of the first half of the movie. Yeah, definitely. I think people should be made aware of how they are being programmed via these platforms and these AI. That it does create these echo chambers that essentially they are. It's almost like being in the matrix. Being part of social media, being immersed in social media, is a lot like being in the matrix. You're living your own little world, um, in which everybody essentially agrees with you, and dissenters are few and far between, right? Uh, it reminds me of, let's say, it was the late 80s, and it was a story I heard about Ronald Reagan's second term and being elected to his second term. Um, I was a young teenager or just about to become a teenager. Um, so I was about 12 to 13, somewhere in there. And I was listening to some adults talk, and they were allowing me to sit there and listen. And at the time, I was, of course, super liberal, super, down with the Republican Party, Democrats this, Democrats that, because they were for the little guy, I thought, and I had all these preconceived notions about politics, even though I had no idea. Like, I hadn't even taken a civics class, right? But I had already, the indoctrination process had already started. And I thought I knew because this is what MTV told me. And so, MTV News told me this, that, and the other. So I believed it. Um, but as I listened to these adults talk, there was this little anecdote about how uh, one guy, was talking to some of his friends at a dinner party, and uh, or whatever. It wasn't really a dinner party. It was a little, I say that to give you the picture, right? Mental picture. Uh, at a get together, and as they were talking, they were surprised to find out that this guy had voted for Reagan, and they went on to continue talking. They're like, "Wow, I could, well that, well finally I met somebody who voted for Reagan." And this is why I couldn't believe Reagan won, because nobody I knew had voted for Reagan. And this these two adults, as they were talking, they sat there and they had a conversation about how odd that is, right? How odd it was that these people had clearly put themselves into a bubble where they hung out with, 90% of people, agreed with them politically, or if they disagreed with them, were too scared for the social, you know, uh, shame, or, the singling out, that they wouldn't tell them the truth. And so it seemed very, very interesting to me at the time. What I see now today, and what, with social media, and the film talks a bit about this, is that essentially that's what social media is doing now, is and it's speeding along the process, because the reality is we will do what is comfortable, and what is comfortable is to get confirmation bias, right? Confirmation bias means that if we think that the world is a certain way, we're going to find things that confirm to us that our belief about the world, that our worldview is in fact correct and right, and that we are correct and right. And we also live in a world where being right, being correct, is of value in of itself. It doesn't even matter, you know, what that means for the rest of society. It doesn't matter, whether it really brings value to us. It is value in of itself, right? That, well, I'm correct, I'm right. Nobody ever wants to be wrong. Being wrong, is one of the things that's held over your head. Um, and making mistakes in our society is kind of held over your head. So, of course, we're all going to um, lean towards confirmation bias. So, the film talks about how this confirmation bias is one of the tools that, you know, social media uses in order to start to put you into its own form of the matrix, where you live in your own little world, and every news article you see, uh, every meme that you come across, uh, the friends that are recommended to you, um, all of these things will be things that confirm your worldview. So I think that that's something that we should be really aware of. I believe it's, you know, something that a lot of people don't realize is happening when it comes to Facebook and Twitter and all these things. And I think that's why people are so caught off guard when they don't understand, right? For instance, let's say we have a Trump supporter, and they're like, man, I can't believe that these people support Biden. I mean, Biden, had 47 years to do X, Y, and Z, and he just passed this law and this law, which was horrible. and he didn't do X and he didn't do Y, and but he did do Z, and that was horrible and it was bad for the country. How did these people not know it? uh, you know, why aren't they getting these facts, or the facts are right in their face and they don't see them? Look at this news article. What that Trump supporter doesn't realize is that quite literally, that liberal, or libtard as he may call him, right? He may label him, doesn't see those stories. Doesn't see those stories. Okay? That guy is seeing stories about how Trump colluded with Russia, how Trump is xenophobic, how Trump is a racist. Okay? That's the stories that he's seen. That's that liberal is seeing those stories. So what essentially it's doing is polarizing each one of us even further away from each other and segregating us into little tiny boxes and groups of what we believe and what we disbelieve. So that part and all the explaining of what's going on with that, I think, is invaluable when it comes to the social dilemma and watching this film. So I do recommend it for that. Now, guard yourself because they start to say things that sound like good ideas towards the end of the movie, but if you really think about what they're saying, it probably is going. They don't realize that what they're suggesting is yet filled with an, just like social media is in its current state, full of unintended consequences that were not good, polarizing us, putting us into boxes, segregating us into little factions and tribes, and, really exacerbating the problem of disagreement. This is one of the, while there are some amazing things that can be done through social media and have been done through social media that are good things for humanity, these are some of the bad things, the unintended consequences. Some of the things that they talk about as a solution, or not even a solution, but what they seem to be suggesting towards the end of the movie, also is filled with its own set of unintended consequences, which would be negative. And one of the things they say, or that they allude to, is that, well, they're alluding to the fact that these social media conglomerates should, uh, make sure that only what's true is filtered through their system and filtered through their platforms, because we should all agree on what truth is. And while that may sound smart and may sound positive, uh, in a very sophomoric kind of way, upon any kind of further contemplation, you're going to realize that that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea because nobody in the history of the world have we ever agreed on what the truth is. From, to paraphrase uh, Martin Luther King Jr., from Catholics to Protestants, from Jews to Gentiles, right? From Christians to Muslims, Hindus and Muslims, right? We have not agreed on what truth is. But that's okay. The problem isn't that we need to agree on what the truth is. That's not the solution. The solution is not, okay, we need some uh, I don't know what you would say, uh, some group that determines some court that determines what is true and what is not true, and then that's the only things that can be disseminated on these platforms. Absolutely not. What we need is a protection for everybody to share their view and their opinion of what they believe is true, and allow the marketplace of ideas to win based on the merits of the argument, not based on, what somebody else thinks is more, you know, virtuous than the other. And that's essentially what we've had happen. That is at the root of the problem with social media. It's at the root of the problem that we're seeing with the election right now, with, Antifa and BLM and those protests devolving into riots, is that essentially there is no uh, civility in the sense that I have a right, if I disagree with you, to argue my points and the validity of my points against your points. No, I'm speaking falsities, and that means you need to shut me down, or vice versa. And therein lies the problem. So, while I think there's some really good information and there is some really good education going on in the social dilemma, I also feel that a big part of the problem is, and where we started to have the problem of putting people into boxes, is when we decided that we were going to allow these platforms, which were supposed to be like a utility, they were supposed to be like the telephone, okay? Open communication. When we decided we were going to allow them, and when we were going to start to ask them to filter what was reaching our eyes and our ears, rather than doing it ourselves. Because think about this. Let's say, let's say a story about uh, the latest one that just came out was the Joe Biden emails and the laptop, or Hunter Biden's laptop, and Twitter and Facebook actively tried to suppress that story. Now they have all these reasons why, and you can take it at face value and think that it was just an over aggressive algorithm or whatever the case may be. I don't believe that. I believe it was chosen to be filtered out actively. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the discussion. So you have that happening. Imagine, if you will, you were on a telephone call and you're like, oh, hey, I just picked up this, uh, the Phoenix Times, and let's say I'm talking to my mom, and she lives in another state. Maybe she lives in, Washington State. And I'm like, Ma, I just picked up the Phoenix Times. And the Phoenix Times is breaking a story right now that says that, um, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. So Hunter Biden's laptop, this is Ma Bell. We have recognized that the conversation regarding the story you are about to quote may be false. You are not allowed to have a conversation with other parties regarding this story. Your call will now be ended. Beep. Right? What, would we be okay with that? Would we be okay with that? I don't think we would be. Okay? I don't think we would be. And I think therein lies the problem. So check out the movie if you have the time. It is a pretty good movie. It is a bit long. It is a bit repetitive. After about the first 20 minutes, you kind of get the gist of what they're saying, and you understand what they're saying and the points they're trying to make. And they could probably skip. They could probably cut out a good 20 to 40 minutes of the movie in the middle, and shorten it down to about a 40 to 60 minute documentary. Um, but if you have the time to sit down and check it out, it is a good movie. I think it's important that we inform ourselves on this because, number one, so that you understand what's going on as far as social media, and so that you have education on it, so at least you can make a better decision. And then number two, so that you see what they might be suggesting as the fix, which to me is might be worse than the problem. So anyhow, that's what I got on that, guys. Thank you for this red pill moment, and we will move on. Okay, guys, so final segment of the show. We're going to talk a little bit about the breaking news from this weekend. Apparently, Israel Adesanya will step up to 205, the light heavyweight division, to take on Jan Blachowicz for the UFC light heavyweight title. Now, maybe I'm a purist. Maybe I am just a Adesanya hater. But personally, I think that this is a horrible idea. Um, you know, we have this ridiculous confirmation bias. Excuse me, not confirmation bias. This is ridiculous recency bias in MMA. It's very, very strong. I think this is a mistake for a number of reasons. Number one, okay, is, you know, what is this? All of two title defenses Adesanya has had, and you're already sending him up to the 205-pound division. Makes absolutely no sense. You got guys at 205 who have paid their dues, done what they had to, stood in line, and you're going to allow Adesanya to jump the line. I'm just not a fan of that. Um, I think that it's a bad look. Number two, I understand that the middleweight division has an issue right now with Israel Adesanya. I do. I understand that. I understand that he's beaten Paulo Costa. He's beaten Kevin Gastelum. He's beaten Robert Whitaker. Right? Um, he's beaten Yoel Romero. Okay? I understand that at the top of the division, you have a bit of a dilemma when it comes to Adesanya. What do you do with him? And now, even though Whitaker just beat Cannonier, right? Had Cannonier won, a little bit more of a storyline because I don't believe Adesanya has ever fought in Cannonier before. So a little bit more of a storyline, a little bit better fight. But Whitaker beat Cannonier. So Whitaker becomes the guy. Whitaker supposedly is not interested in fighting Adesanya just yet, meaning you have to do something with Adesanya. Middleweight division, Gastelum can't get out of his own way and put together a string of wins. I think a lot of people would be interested in watching a rematch between Gastelum and Adesanya, but it's going to be a really hard fight to sell with Gastelum having a hard time putting together a streak of wins. I mean, we're just being honest when it comes to the marketing. So what do you do? What do you do with Adesanya if it's not Whitaker? Kind of hard to put in a Cannoneer coming off a loss. Kind of hard to have him match up against Paulo Costa without Paulo Costa getting a win first, given that Paulo just got beat down by him. Right? It's a really hard proposition. I understand that. The problem I have with him stepping up to Jan is twofold, or I guess threefold. Number one, he's jumping the line in front of a bunch of 205ers who have paid their dues at 205. That's number one. Number two, Jan is a fighter that's a favorable matchup for Israel Adesanya at 205. Now, generally, this wouldn't be a problem if Jan wasn't the title holder. And it's not that I don't want Izzy to win the title. Okay? That's not the problem. That's not what concerns me. What concerns me is that at 205, a heavy-handed striker that really sits down on his punches is going to seem like they're stuck in the mud in comparison to Israel Adesanya. When that heavy striking tactic is also a counter striker, which Jan is, that's what he likes to do, is to counter strike against another counter striker, Izzy, what generally happens is the better counter striker, the better trap fighter wins. And if we're going to be legitimately intellectually honest, we all know that Israel Adesanya is the better trap fighter. So I would favor Israel Adesanya in this matchup. Probably, I would say 60-40. He will win the fight, right? I would say that's about fair. The problem is, were Izzy to beat Jan, well, Jan is the title holder. Is Izzy going to then defend the 205 belt? Because I don't know that Izzy is ready for a 205 well-rounded or 205 heavy wrestling styled fighter. I don't think he is. I think it's a much different type of fight for him to fight somebody who is a more well-rounded style fighter or somebody who is an amazing wrestler. This is one of the reasons why I think that Jon Jones Izzy fight, I don't think that Izzy is interested in fighting Jon Jones at all, to be completely honest. I think he understands that Jon Jones would take a lot of the shine and glean off of his reputation. So I think that he would really like to avoid a fight with Jon Jones for as long as possible in order to get his name up so that when he takes that risk of fighting Jon Jones, he makes a ton of money, which is smart. Very smart. But I don't think he really wants to fight Jon Jones at this time. And that makes me think that if he doesn't want to fight Jon Jones, and Jon Jones's wrestling is good, very good, okay? But we wouldn't say that he's a heavy wrestling style fighter. What is Izzy going to do if he's defending the 205 belt and he's up against a very good wrestler? You have to understand that at 205, guys are going to be able to take shots a lot better. They just will be. Izzy is used to doing certain things as a striker that he thinks he's going to be able to do. But you can't do those things all the time against wrestlers. You just can't. It just is what it is. You have to be able to wrestle. to get out of those positions, or you have to adapt your style, very much like Anderson Silva did. So, while I think that, Izzy will beat Jan, I feel like if you're not getting a solid commitment from Izzy that, hey, I'm going to stay at 205 and I'm going to defend the 205 belt, you're kind of migrating the problems that you have at middleweight. Now you're migrating them into light heavyweight. And we already see what having a stagnant heavyweight division is doing to that division. I just feel like I love Stipe. Don't get me wrong, I love Stipe. He's a great fighter, one of my favorite fighters. That being said, it's really killing the heavyweight division for Stipe not to be active. It just is what it is. It's killing the division. And so essentially what you're going to say is you're going to take the middleweight champ and make him inactive. And then you're going to also make him the champ, or possibly make him the champ of the light heavyweight division, and then still be inactive. And then you have the heavyweight division not being active. So, I mean, at what point? Now, people keep saying, well, this is the first step in Izzy fighting Jon Jones at 205. And I'm sorry, I have to shake my head and say, oh, contraire move where? I don't think so. I think that this is just a way for Izzy to market himself, because I cannot, if you don't schedule this Jon Jones Israel Adesanya fight, like in the next, let's say, 6 months, before Jon Jones takes his first heavyweight title, or excuse me, his first heavyweight fight, I'm sorry, but you can't convince me that Jon is going to shed all the muscle mass that he's put on to make a legit heavyweight run for one fight with Israel Adesanya. Jon Jones is trying to be upward of 140 pounds at like 10% body fat or less. I would say probably 10%, so he could cut a little bit of it, still be safe, and make weigh-ins, right? Most heavyweights, they're walking around, they're 240, 260, at least. Walk around weight. Walk into the cage at 240, 260. Jon Jones is not trying to put on that kind of muscle mass, that kind of lean muscle mass, so that he can still do the things that he likes to do, to cut it all off to accommodate Israel Adesanya. And this recency bias of Israel Adesanya is ridiculous. Like, seriously, guys. It's like almost the same thing with Khabib. 3 title defenses and he's the GOAT. Israel Adesanya, 2 title defenses and he's already in the conversation of the GOAT. I mean, put together a long-lasting legacy, a long-lasting resume, and then let's talk about GOAT status. See, it's always easier when you're shooting for the top gun, when you're still chasing the title. It's easier, and most champions will tell you that. Almost all champions will tell you that. It's harder when you are the champ and you're having to fend off every new challenge. So, all in all, I mean, it looks like this is official. It looks like it's going to happen. I can't believe it's going to happen. Dana White, I think, is asking for a whole new set of problems by putting this fight together. Not to diminish Izzy, not that I think he's going to lose. I really do think he will win this fight. That being said, the best thing that could happen for the UFC and the sport, particularly for the fans, is for Blachowicz to win this fight. Because if Izzy wins this fight, you just took the stagnant middleweight division problems and amplified them by making it the stagnant middleweight and light heavyweight division. Okay, guys, that's what I have for today. I know we were all over the place today. I tried to do as many topics as I can to get in, get out. There's so many things more that I wanted to talk about. I know we didn't do a morsel last week. We'll try and maybe do a morsel this week, but we'll see how that goes. So, remember, guys, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose.
It's my race, it's my weight, it's because I'm a Christian. I hate the internet and anyone who has an opinion. And everybody angry if you say white. Okay, fine. Pass me the brush and I'll paint my face to the shades right. Let's talk about abortion. Sorry, tell me how this works. Bacteria is life on Mars, but a heartbeat isn't life on Earth? Weird. People are so stupid. Why